Okay, so I did my presentation of my theorist on Jacques Derrida. So he was a French theorist. He was born in July of 1930 and he passed away in October of 2004. So essentially, in Nye, he was described to believe that there is nothing of meaning outside of the text. It's kind of the general description. So we'll dive more into that, obviously, as we go along, but that's just kind of where to start off. So, in terms of his background, he was born in El Algeria, and he moved to France after World War II. In high school, the Vichy regimen in France proclaimed certain interdictions concerning the native languages of Algeria. And he calls this experience the interdiction or the kind of the stopping or the halting. And he described it as being unforgettable and generalizable. And so the Jewish laws passed by the Vichy regimen interrupted his high school studies. And so in 1949, he moved to Paris, um, and he began to study philosophy. And after taking the entrance exam twice, he got into this school here. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Um, but he would then at this school be surrounded by many philosophers that were coming of the age. Um, and this kind of just explains how all of his works lead up to him developing his main theory, which is deconstruction. And that kind of begins to define his thoughts overall. And then eventually he would become the director of studies of philosophy at this school until he passes away in 2004. So here are a list of some pertinent works that he had. A lot of these are his earlier works. However, he did continue on to write until the late 90s before he passed away. So a lot of these kind of in the beginning here go along with his development of his theories. And then his three published books at once in 1967, Writing Indifference, Voice of Phenomenon, and Of Grammatology, which I have a PDF copy of uploaded, all kind of go around his variances of definitions of what deconstruction is to him. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. So along with those pertinent works, here are some of the influential theorists that he got to work with or study off of, that he was influenced by. So in terms of adopting and departing from the ideas, Husserl kind of allowed for him to develop a new understanding with the problem of language. Husserl, and along with in the 1950s, the concept of phenomenology, which is the study of consciousness and the objects of direct experience from what the nature of being is. And so, along all of this, is what he developed his master's thesis upon in school. With Hegel, Hippolyte, and de Gondelac. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing those correct. Those three kind of helped him direct his doctoral thesis, which was the ideality of the literary object. He never ended up finishing this, but it did lead him into a new way of thinking. I don't have him listed here, but he also participated in a seminar with Foucault and utilized what he learned in the basis for, as that would be the basis for Cogito and the History of Madness, which I had listed prior. He learned from Levinas the concept of alterity, and he used this to branch off and developed his concept of deconstruction. Heidegger also developed just the concept of destruction And it's kind of also believed that this concept sort of led his way of the viewpoint of what is deconstruction. And then his three works that were published at once that I referenced prior are all variants of deconstruction, and he provides several definitions over the year of this term. And the development of the theory kind of in these books are his most concrete, or at least what he's most known for, because those three publishes at a time actually made him pretty famous. So moving on to the key terms and definitions, I have a main definition of deconstruction, a definition of metaphysics in the presence and logocentrism, RKA writing, binary opposition, as well as difference. So deconstruction, just overall, it's a very interesting concept. You don't really think about it, but it actually does make a lot of sense. So you're kind of just diving into how, like what I said in the very beginning, he believed that there's nothing of meaning outside of the text. So like we have to see text for what it is. And you can't technically just assume all of these other generalizations from a text. You just kind of have to see what the text is, but you also have to think about how so many words have different meanings, or one word can have multiple meanings. So it is kind of problematic that we will assume that one thing has one meaning, even though all of the words that make up that one thing have several different meanings. Moving on to metaphysics of presence or logocentrism. Speech and not writing is central to language, thus we can liberate our ideas of writing from being subordinated to our ideas of speech. So this kind of goes along. Similarly with deconstruction is how when we're talking, you can generalize a little bit more from language and the ideas of writing. However, writing is just straightforward what is on the paper, and we have to take it for what it is. Archaic writing is an original form of language which is not derived from speech. It's a form of language which is unhindered by the difference between speech and writing. So that kind of goes along with both. And then another term that he got, this is a generalized idea that was given by Prestad in 2007. But the idea of binary opposition is it acknowledges our humane tendency to think in terms of opposition. So like cause and effect kind of. And then another concept that I included that Derrida created was the concept of difference. And it's known as the hinge between speech and writing that allows there to be inner meaning as well as outer representation. So all of these kind of just go along with what he thinks of in terms of speech and language and writing. So just to kind of like sum up these terms, in general, you can't necessarily depict the meaning of text because there's several different meanings of each word, like I said, and no word or text can have just one interpretation. So I thought Nye put it best, and it kind of helped me understand a little bit more because this is such a confusing concept kind of because we don't always think about it. So Nye said, and gave an alternative translation to his concept of there is no outside of text. So Nye said it is language, not text, which is everything. If there is such a thing as reality beyond words, then it is not possible for us to know such reality without the use of these words. So just, it's essentially saying it's impossible to know the true meaning of something because of the link between language and reality isn't necessarily so reliable. However, words are there. It is reality. Like without words, we wouldn't have a form of communication. So we essentially need to make our own meaning. We have to go beyond the text to find differences. But however, words it's just realistic that words don't have fixed meanings. It's kind of thought to be that his translation from French to English was so strict that the meaning of there is no outside of text is kind of more, I guess you could say radical, whereas Nye is depicting it in this way in more of a looser term, as they think that it was to be. So in terms of critiquing this theory, Nye did a really good job of explaining his theories and used this sort of analogy, I guess you could say, to explain it, where we have to take some context from things, although like the words have multiple meanings and stuff like that. Like there is like realistic, just like general concepts that you can take. So like I really enjoyed this example. So everyone knows the Three Little Pigs fairy tale, and like although like the words may not go to show like what exactly it is, like you know what it's not, so you wouldn't describe it as a slasher horror story, they say. And I just thought that was a really good concept, because although that there are infinite possibilities of what something can mean, there's not enough context to give something it's presented to be meaning. So this viewpoint is based off of only structuralist viewpoints, so that makes it very narrowed in general. And then another argument prior to interpretations, it's just that it's incomplete rather than mistaken or wrong, and this was said by Ellis in 1989. And the general theory of culture and mythology that implies with these elements is that human culture must be understood by way of their relationship to a broader system.